our detox system, right? There's kind of that old saying that the solution to pollution is dilution, right? You need to be adequately hydrated in order for the body to properly eliminate those toxins via urine, stool, or sweat. So, you know, in my acupuncture practice, when I'm seeing 3 or 4 patients an hour, how much time do I have to sit down and think about how this patient is hydrating? I often don't. And there's probably a lot of low-hanging fruit that I am missing. And, one of the benefits of having functional medicine and functional medicine consults and health coaching is that it gives you the time to just exhale, focus on the patient, focus on what you're seeing here, and think about just what basic things could this person be getting wrong. Because I'll tell you what, like a lot of people have read a lot of books. Health is, obviously a big topic on all the talk shows and the doctors and, all this kind of stuff. But it's the super basic stuff that we need to get right with our patients. And that stuff is often totally off the rails. People will have read something weird on, Yahoo News about health, and you find out that they're doing something bizarre with like green coffee bean extracts or something. Like, you're just going to come across a bunch of stuff. And actually, that brings up another point. Sorry if I keep coming up with points here, but that are not on the slides, but these are just things that are important. A lot of patients that come to you, and you probably already have this happening now, a lot of patients are going to have what we call sort of supplement creep, meaning that they're going to come in with a list of supplements they're taking that is insanely long. Like they're taking like 30 different supplements because they read about this here and a friend told them about this here, and they were taking methylated B because they're worried that they have a methylation problem, even though they have no idea if they have a methylation problem. By doing these labs, you are doing a serious favor to your patients by simplifying what they're doing and making sure that what they're getting is what they need. I remember just like a month ago, and this seems to happen like every 6 months, I saw some, study that was publicized in the news, and it was, supplements don't work. Like half the time you'll see news stories that are like vitamin D supplementation decreases certain type of cancer or whatever. And then half the time you'll see a story that says, vitamin D supplementation shown to actually do nothing or something. The thing that we need to realize is that just like Chinese herbs, supplements work if the patient needs the supplements. If they are deficient in that, then that is what they need. If they're not deficient in it, it's not going to do them any good, right? Like, how many times do you have a patient who, I don't know, came in low energy, run down, and you gave them Gui Pi Tong, and they just got so much better. Like, they're sleeping better, they're digesting better, their energy is better. And then they decide that they're going to give Gui Pi Tong to their friend who's run down, and nothing happens with their friend. Their friend doesn't get better at all. And they're like, this worked so well. And then I gave it to my friend Joe and nothing happened. Because the diagnosis wasn't right? If you had seen Joe and made the proper diagnosis, he might have realized that he was spleen qi deficient or that he was something else and given him the appropriate formula, and he would have felt better. The labs show us the way. Like, if there is one thing I could like fuse into your brain, it's that our functional labs is basically our pulse diagnosis. That's what it is. It allows us to actually see. I mean, I remember, I forget if it was Jimmy Chang or if it was Richard Tan. He used to always say, don't believe your patients. Your patients lie to you. And I always like cracked up about that. But what he was saying is the same thing that I'm saying here, that the symptoms are misleading. The symptoms do not tell you what is actually happening. They are important because they're important to the patient, but they don't tell you what's happening, right? You need to give the appropriate therapy for what the patient needs, and that is lab based in the case of functional medicine. And these patients are spending a fortune on supplements they don't need. They're dumping that stuff down the toilet, basically. If you're trying to sell an organics test or sell an adrenal panel, just the very fact of the amount of money the patient's going to probably save on their supplement bill from the stupid stuff that they're doing already, that's practically motivation enough to do it right there. And this also comes back and loops back into maintenance programs and the development of and which can be a great way to keep in touch with your patient. And Dan's going to talk about this a little bit more at the end of the day, but running an organics panel once a year on patients, it really shows you where the ship is sailing. It shows you what their nutrient needs are. It shows you how their detox pathways are doing. It shows you stuff about their neurotransmitter function. It shows you the metabolic markers, like how their body is actually pulling in fats and carbohydrates into the Krebs cycle to produce ATP. It's showing you about mitochondrial health. And by looking at all this stuff, you can kind of set people up for a maintenance plan for the year. Maybe they don't need to come in for acupuncture. Maybe they're feeling pretty good, right? But it allows you to stay in touch with the patient and help keep them healthy and help keep that ship roughly on course. And that is super profound work as well, because nobody is getting that right. And your patients are going to buy those supplements anyway. They should be buying the right ones from you and remaining healthy, and you should be keeping your patients healthy. It makes good business sense, but it's also, it's just fundamentally like the purpose of our work to a large degree. Okay, so back to our slides here briefly, and then we're gonna sort of review the basic model. Remember, this is the slide that Dan said took him 10 years to come up with. And we're going to review that, and then we're going to workshop a few more of these things so that you guys see once again how to communicate it to the patient. And then we're going to jump into the new patient interview. And we are going to spend some time on that because the new patient interview in functional medicine serves a different purpose than the new patient interview in Chinese medicine. They're both critically important. They both lead to the therapeutic outcome that we're looking for in the beginning of a program, but their purpose is a little bit different, and I'll get into that. So once again, we look at this diagram and we think about how, these stressors, usually emotional, related to loss, like death, divorce, overwork, kids. I'll tell you, like, you could probably have an entire practice set up around putting parents back together after their first kid is born. Like, that was actually when I got in touch with and took the original version of this course, was right after my son was born. And like, he had gotten to the point where he was sleeping well and I was still a total wreck with like insomnia, and I tried everything to try to get it better and I could not sleep. And so I decided, okay, let's give this functional medicine thing a try. And I did the original version of this class, and then I ran my own cortisol lab, and lo and behold, I was a stage 3 with a serious rhythm disruption going on. And when I corrected that, and I slept, the lights went back on, so anyway, you can have any of these things that come and affect body system number 1, our neuroendocrine system, right? Our hormonal system. If that proceeds and is not, it first goes into a stage 1 where we have high cortisol, then cortisol starts to drop. As that's happening, we start to get decreased immune response in the gut via that secretory IgA. As that happens, we start to get all kinds of leaky gut problems, all kinds of pathogen problems that end up, with these antibody antigen situations that dump onto the liver gets overwhelmed, it further messes with cortisol, and it goes around and around. And we see it occur in this order, and we treat it in this order. The patient is always going to relate to symptom clusters, but as we just talked about, those clusters change, and it could be anything. So therefore, it might not even in any way resemble the original problem. It might end up being that, like we talked about, like they got an infection and that's what triggered everything off, and they're coming into you because they can't lose weight anymore, but they're not having any digestive symptoms, right? The symptoms can completely not mirror the root cause, but the root cause is what we always got to be thinking about. If these things continue, we end up with things like depression, PCOS, PMS, some of this more advanced male or female hormone disruption, IBS, constipation, bloating. You guys remember that slide yesterday that I blew through at lightning speed towards the end of my time when I was talking about Giardia and the presence of Giardia in IBS patients? It's just like boggles my mind. Like, we should be screening. We are doing such a service to people's health by screening them for these low-grade GI infections and clearing them up, because they may not be having GI symptoms, but it can be totally messing with them. Or they can be having GI symptoms and be told by their doctor that, oh, you just have irritable bowel syndrome, and there you go. That's, nobody ever bothers to do a PCR test on their gut and figure out what's going on. It's like shocking. I feel like, can we not all agree that a minimal bar in medicine should be that our patients are free of active infections? I don't know. I don't feel like that's too big of a thing to ask. Poor alcohol tolerance. This is another one that, like, probably many of us have experienced. I mean, I'm not going to give my exact age, but let's say that I'm not quite 50. And as I was getting, older and more stressed and had kids and all this stuff, I certainly found that I could not tolerate the alcohol that I used to put down when I was like spending my student loan money in bars in the Mission in my 20s. And, oftentimes we'll be like, oh, it's because I'm just getting older. That's what's happening. I'm just getting older. It's not that people are just getting older. It's that people are getting more run down. They're getting more dysregulated. That allostatic stress load bucket that we were talking about, it's filling up with all kinds of just different things, little infections, liver toxicity, all this stuff. And all of a sudden, that burden on the liver, we start to develop poor alcohol tolerance and allergies. And then cortisol tanks, and then we get pain and inflammation all over the body. So once again, we correct stuff in the order that we did it, and then, reviewing the lab and presenting it in relation to the patient's complaints. So once again, let's just quickly workshop a couple of these things. Okay, let's just talk it through like you were going to talk it to your patient tomorrow. And we're going to do this in the context of explaining why they should purchase an adrenal lab, and an adrenal lab is going to help heal them out of this process, right? So